Okay, so imagine this. You step into a small-town hardware store on VE Day. That's May 8th, 1945.
Right.
The air is just thick with relief, with euphoria. The war in Europe is finally over, and in that one moment of, collective joy, two strangers lock eyes.
A man behind the counter, a woman just looking for some kind of release.
And they share this one impulsive, totally forbidden kiss.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what if that single, maybe 3-second mistake wasn't just a mistake? What if it was the seed of a secret that would quietly, relentlessly just warp the lives of two families for the next 40 years?
Yeah, we're talking about a history that's rewritten in an instant. It creates
Right.
these generational consequences that absolutely nobody could have seen coming.
That is the explosive premise of Patrick Ryan's novel, Buckeye. So for this deep dive, we've gone through a whole stack of sources, reviews, summaries, interviews with the author to really get why this book has generated so much buzz.
And our mission today is to go a little deeper than just the plot. We want to analyze the structure Ryan built here. We're going to look at how he uses this sweeping backdrop of mid-20th century America.
It's from WWII all the way to Vietnam.
Exactly. From the quiet desperation of the late 30s through the moral reckoning of the Vietnam War to really dissects these powerful themes of hidden identity, corrosive secrets, and what the sources call the incredibly difficult generation-spanning road to genuine forgiveness.
Okay, let's unpack this. I think we should start with the architect of the story himself, Patrick Ryan. He has a pretty fascinating path to this book.
He really does.
He was born in D.C., raised down in Florida, and then spent a huge chunk of time in Richmond, Virginia. He was teaching literature and composition at places like VCU and the University of Richmond.
And what's really crucial, the sources all point this out, while he was teaching, he also spent 8 years tending bar.
Right. In Richmond before moving to New York City in the late 90s.
And you just have to think that experience of observing people, of listening to their secrets when their guard is down, that has to inform his eye for character.
Oh, absolutely. And he's deeply embedded in the literary world now. He was the associate editor of Granta, and he's currently the editor-in-chief of the literary magazine One Story.
It's a serious literary pedigree.
It is, and it's a resume that just screams, I know how to build a good story. And while he'd already built a reputation with some great YA fiction, like Saints of Augustine and Gemini Bites.
And that short story collection, The Dream Life of Astronauts.
Right. Buckeye is explicitly his major leap into adult literary fiction. It feels like this is the moment he really commits to that epic scale.
And the scale is definitely epic. I mean, the novel was an immediate phenomenon.
Oh, yeah.
A New York Times bestseller, a read with Jenna pick, BNN National Book Club selection. It's already being translated into 12 languages.
Wow.
And it's a huge book.
Yeah.
It's almost 500 pages.
Yeah.
It's designed to feel like a sweeping saga covering 4 decades, from the 1930s into the 1980s.
All in this fictional small town, Bonamy, Ohio.
And that choice of Ohio, the Buckeye State, is so deliberate. It connects this very personal story to that whole heartland American mythos.
That long timeline is so important because the central question is really about how one moment can just ripple out for decades.
Yeah.
But before we even get to the kiss, what was going on with these 4 main characters? The sources suggest Ryan deliberately gave them all these pre-existing burdens.
That's the crucial insight. These characters are already ticking time bombs of unfulfilled expectations and societal pressure. Let's start with the Jenkins couple.
Okay.
You have Cal Jenkins. He's this local guy who wanted, more than anything, to be a hero in World War II. But he was rejected by the military.
Why?
Because one of his legs was 2 inches shorter than the other.
And that becomes the source of just profound, lifelong shame. The sources really emphasize that. It's a star he got, not in battle, but because he just couldn't meet that era's definition of masculinity.
Exactly. While other men are being celebrated as heroes, Cal is stuck at home feeling completely diminished.
And that's already putting a strain on his marriage.
A huge strain. His wife, Becky, is described as this quirky young woman who has a spiritual gift. She's a seer. She communicates with the dead.
Which you'd think would be interesting, but for Cal...
For Cal, it just isolates her further from him. He's suspicious of her skills. He's resentful of the attention she gets for it. It's the exact opposite of the stable, respectable life he feels he's supposed to have.
Okay, so that's one deeply unhappy couple. Now let's switch to the Salts.
Right. Margaret Salt. She was abandoned as an infant, grew up in foster homes and orphanages. So she's desperate for a life that feels real, not just respectable.
And she finds small-town Bonamy totally suffocating.
Utterly.
Ah.
She marries Felix, but she craves this deep connection and physical attraction. And both of those things are, well, they're completely absent in her marriage.
And the reason for that is Felix Salt, the handsome executive who is carrying probably the heaviest secret of them all.
He is. Felix is gay. And in mid-century America, especially in a place like Bonomi, that identity forces him so deep into the closet. His life with Margaret is a performance.
So you have two men just steeped in shame, one for a physical failure, the other for a hidden identity, and two women who are starving for some kind of authentic connection.
The whole situation is just primed for catastrophe. It truly is.
And VE Day becomes the trigger.
It's the catalyst. Felix is away, serving in the Navy on a cargo ship, kind of escaping his life. And back home, Margaret walks into Cal's hardware store, and that impulsive kiss. It's just the inevitable collision of all their deep-seated needs.
It's the starting gun for the whole tragedy.
It really is. It sets two very vulnerable people on a path toward, well, utter ruin.
You know, it's interesting how Ryan handles the timeline right after that kiss. He doesn't just focus on the affair between Cal and Margaret. He keeps Felix's story going overseas.
Yes, it's a parallel emotional trauma. And that's what makes the betrayal so layered.
The affair is happening while Felix is serving.
Exactly. But at the same time, Felix is having his own profound secret experience. Aboard that Navy vessel, he finds true love. He falls for another sailor named Augie.
So for the first time in his life, he's able to live honestly.
If only in secret, yeah. Far away in the Pacific.
Which is just heartbreaking, because it means everyone is deceiving each other out of desperation, not really malice, but then Felix's ship is torpedoed.
And the devastation is just immense. Augie is killed. Felix comes home deeply traumatized, not just by the war, but by this profound, unacknowledged grief over losing the only person he ever really loved.
And he returns to a wife who's pregnant.
Margaret had ended the affair with Cal shortly before Felix came back, but she knows immediately. She knows the child, Tom, is Cal's son.
And she decides right then to say nothing.
She chooses the lie. Maybe she's rationalizing it, trying to preserve the fragile facade of her marriage.
And then the complexity just deepens, because Cal and Becky already have a son, Skip.
Right. And in a small town like that, the boys, Tom and Skip, they naturally grow up together. They become best friends.
All while being completely unaware that they're half-brothers.
The sheer pressure of that secret, according to all the sources, is what just hangs over the next 2 decades in Bonomi. It becomes its own character almost.
A malignant force.
Yes. And the trigger for its disclosure isn't some slow discovery. It's a moment of pure rage. Years later, Margaret finally reveals Tom's true parentage, but only after she finds out about Felix's wartime affair with Augie.
And that's when it all just implodes.
Completely. Margaret leaves for Columbus. Cal and Becky separate. But here is the critical turning point. Felix and Cal, the two men who've been betrayed, they agree to keep the secret buried.
To protect Tom, or so they think.
Right. They protect the secret from the one person it affects the most. And this brings us to the novel's central metaphor, the Buckeye.
The good luck charm.
A talisman of good fortune. But Ryan reminds us, and the sources all highlight this, that the kernel inside the nut has a poisonous interior, a kernel of toxicity.
Which is a perfect metaphor for the secret itself.
It is. It's meant to protect. But because it's a lie, it only grows more toxic over time, contaminating everyone it touches.
So that imagery suggests that time doesn't bury secrets. It feeds them until they'd eventually break through the surface.
With devastating force.
So let's fast forward to the 1960s, to the Vietnam War. How does Ryan use this second major war to deepen the consequences for the next generation?
This is where the story really pivots from domestic drama to a much larger generational tragedy. The sons, Tom and Skip, are in their early 20s now, and they perfectly mirror the national divide.
How so?
Tom, the secret, illegitimate son, he's in college studying communication. He's actively protesting the war. He's the anti-establishment voice.
And Skip, Cal and Becky's legitimate son, is the opposite.
Exactly. He's kind of rootless, drifting from job to job, and then he makes this impulsive, horrifying decision to enlist in the Army. He gets sent to Vietnam.
Which must have been devastating for Cal, the irony there.
It's a brutal irony. Cal, who was consumed by shame for not fighting in WWII, now has to watch his own son go off to fight this incredibly divisive war.
And the ultimate cost of this whole secret, this whole saga, it really falls on the sons.
It does. The sources are very clear about this. Skip is killed during the Tet Offensive.
Oh, wow.
And that immense, irreplaceable loss is the tragedy that finally forces Cal and Becky, who'd been separated for years, to reconcile. They're brought back together not by love, but by this mutual, all-consuming grief.
But even then, the original secret about Tom's father, it's still buried.
Yeah.
Why? Why the continued delay?
I think it was just continued fear. But also, that sense of protection had just calcified into a habit over decades.
Right.
It's not until years later, when Felix Holt is dying from emphysema, that he finally tells Tom the truth. He lays it all out. The V-Day kiss, the affair, everything.
And Tom's reaction is predictable, I guess.
Oh, yeah. He reacts with profound anger, betrayal.
Yeah.
He cuts off all communication. But here's where the novel shifts from just tragedy to something more complex.
Tom eventually comes back.
He comes back to care for Felix in his final days. And the reason the reconciliation works, the reason it feels believable, is because of this critical piece of adult understanding.
What's that?
Tom realizes that Felix, as the book says, acted much as he would have in his situation. He finally understands the impossible constraints Felix was under, being forced into the closet, trapped by society and fear.
So it wasn't malice, it was survival.
It was survival. Felix lied because he was trapped, first by society, then by grief, then just by the habit of silence.
And the sources suggest that this is the real heart of the book, this really hard-won, messy reconciliation. The author himself said that people are ultimately defined by what they do with their mistakes.
Exactly. It's not the sin, it's the response.
The cleanup.
The cleanup. And the author's insight on forgiveness is so key. He says it's not just a single act, but it's a whole lot of decisions. 1 million small decisions every single day that have to be remade over and over again.
Forgiving the lie, forgiving the cover-up, forgiving the pressures that caused it all in the first place.
That's the complexity that lets the novel end on a note of genuine, if kind of tempered, hope.
You see Tom building this bond with Cal and Becky, the family he never knew he had. And you see Cal and Becky finally taking that honeymoon they postponed because of World War II.
It brings it all full circle. And it shows that slow, messy process of healing. That's why it's getting compared to authors like Elizabeth Strout or Ann Tyler for that intimate, quiet domestic drama.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Buckeye is really this tender exploration of the unraveling of time. It makes the case that the lies we tell, even the ones we think are to protect people, they almost always cause more devastation than the original mistake.
It's about stripping away what one review called the bake-like glaze of the American dream to see the raw, complicated flesh underneath.
It's a powerful look at the cost of conformity and silence. The big takeaway from the decades of trauma in the novel is that secrets are rarely sustainable. Time and change and tragedy, they will eventually shatter even the most carefully built lie.
Which leads to our final provocative thought for you to carry forward. Given the immense cost of maintaining a secret over time, and considering how complex it is to ask for forgiveness for both the initial sin and the decades-long cover-up, when is a secret ever truly better off being kept buried?
Or does the pressure of time just guarantee its inevitable, devastating sprout through the surface, making honesty, no matter how painful it is, the only sustainable choice? It's something worth mulling over.